In the heart of Beijing's Forbidden City, on a cold February day in 1912, a 6-year-old boy sat on the dragon throne. He was Puyi, the last emperor of China. With the stroke of a pen, his regent signed away an empire that had lasted for over 2.5 centuries, and a system of dynastic rule that had defined China for millennia. This wasn't just the end of a dynasty, it was the end of an entire world. How did it come to this? How did the mighty Qing, a dynasty that once ruled a quarter of the world's population and presided over a golden age of prosperity, crumble into dust? The story of the Qing Dynasty is not a simple tale of decline. It is a sweeping epic of conquest, culture, ambition, and tragic miscalculation. It's the story of a small group of Manchu horsemen from beyond the Great Wall who seized the mandate of heaven and forged one of the largest empires in world history. But to understand its dramatic fall, we must first journey back to its spectacular rise. Our story begins not in the opulent halls of the Forbidden City, but in the rugged lands of Manchuria in the early 17th century. The Yurkin tribes, a semi-nomadic people, were scattered and often in conflict. But a visionary leader named Nurhaci united them under a single banner. He was a brilliant strategist and a ruthless warrior. He created the 8-banner system, a unique social and military structure that organized Manchu society into a formidable fighting force. These banners weren't just army divisions. They were entire communities bound by loyalty and a shared identity. Nurhaci's ambition was limitless. He declared a new Qing Dynasty and began to challenge the might of the reigning Ming Dynasty, a Chinese empire that was already beginning to show deep cracks. By 1644, the Ming Dynasty was on the verge of collapse, not from the Manchu threat, but from within. A massive peasant rebellion led by Li Zicheng had swept across northern China and captured Beijing. The Ming Yongzheng emperor, seeing his dynasty fall, tragically took his own life. It was chaos. A Ming general, Wu Sangui, guarding the crucial Shanhaiguan Pass on the Great Wall, found himself trapped between the rebel army and the Manchus. He made a fateful decision. He opened the gates and allied with the Manchus to crush the rebels. This was the moment the Manchus had been waiting for. They swept through the pass, defeated Li Zicheng's forces, and seized Beijing. They declared their own dynasty, the Qing, meaning pure, and claimed the mandate of heaven for themselves. The conquest of China had begun. Taking Beijing was one thing, but pacifying all of China was another. It took the Qing nearly 4 decades of brutal warfare to subdue the vast territory. Resistance was fierce, but the banner armies were relentless. To establish control, the Qing imposed their own customs, most famously the Q hairstyle order, forcing Han Chinese men to shave the front of their heads and wear their hair in a long braid as a sign of submission. This act sparked widespread and bloody resistance but ultimately cemented Qing authority. With the country finally under their control, the stage was set for one of China's most prosperous and expansive periods in its history. This golden age is often called the High Qing, dominated by 3 extraordinary emperors, Kangxi, Yongzheng, and Qianlong. Their combined reigns spanned an incredible 133 years. Kangxi, who took the throne as a child, was a true scholar emperor. He was curious, intelligent, and a masterful politician. He stabilized the empire, crushed the last major rebellions, and embarked on grand tours of the south to win the hearts and minds of his Han Chinese subjects. He was a patron of the arts and sciences, commissioning massive projects like the Kangxi Dictionary, which standardized Chinese characters. His reign was a period of peace, stability, and intellectual flourishing. His son, the Yongzheng emperor, was a very different man. Where Kangxi was expansive, Yongzheng was an obsessive, workaholic reformer. He ruled for only 13 years, but was ruthlessly efficient. He cracked down on corruption, reformed the tax system to make it more equitable, and centralized power in his own hands by creating the Grand Council. He was a stern and demanding ruler, often feared, but his tireless efforts streamlined the government and filled the imperial treasury, laying the financial groundwork for his son's glorious reign. and that son was the Qianlong emperor. Qianlong ruled for 60 years and presided over the absolute peak of Qing power and prestige. The empire reached its greatest territorial extent, incorporating Xinjiang, Tibet, and Mongolia, creating the basic geographic shape of modern China. Art and culture flourished under his patronage. He commissioned the Siku Quanshu, or the complete library of the four treasuries, an enormous project to collect and preserve all of China's most important literary works. The Imperial porcelain workshops produced some of the most exquisite ceramics ever made. China, under Qianlong, was the wealthiest and most powerful nation on earth, a sophisticated civilization that viewed the rest of the world as distant and less developed tributaries. It was during Qianlong's reign that the first signs of trouble began to appear, subtle at first, like hairline cracks in a perfect piece of porcelain. The empire was simply too large and too complex. Corruption, which his father had fought so hard against, crept back in, epitomized by the emperor's favorite official, Hessian, who amassed a personal fortune greater than the imperial treasury itself. Military campaigns, once swift and decisive, became long and costly quagmires, and a new, confident power was rising in the West. In 1793, a British delegation led by Lord Macartney arrived in China, hoping to open up trade. But the encounter was a culture clash of epic proportions. The British saw themselves as representatives of a powerful empire seeking equal diplomatic relations. The Qianlong court saw them as just another group of barbarians coming to pay tribute. When Macartney refused to perform the kowtow, the full prostration before the emperor, the mission was doomed. Qianlong famously wrote to King George III that China possessed all things in abundance and had no need of the products of outside barbarians. This was not just arrogance. It was a profound misunderstanding of the seismic shifts happening in the world. The Industrial Revolution was transforming Europe, creating immense wealth and military power that China was completely unprepared to face. The 19th century would bring the Qing Dynasty face to face with this new reality, with catastrophic results. The British, desperate to reverse their trade deficit caused by their insatiable demand for Chinese tea, found a product the Chinese would buy: opium. The drug trade exploded, draining China's silver reserves and creating a massive addiction crisis. When the imperial court finally tried to crack down, the British responded with force. The First Opium War, from 1839 to 1842, was a disaster for the Qing. Their traditional armies and war junks were no match for Britain's steam-powered gunboats and modern rifles. China was defeated and forced to sign the Treaty of Nanjing, the first of many unequal treaties. It ceded Hong Kong to Britain, opened up several ports to foreign trade, and paid a massive indemnity. The era of humiliation had begun. The defeat shattered the myth of Qing invincibility and unleashed a torrent of internal crises. The most devastating of these was the Taiping Rebellion. Lasting from 1850 to 1864, it was one of the bloodiest conflicts in human history. Its leader, Hong Xiuquan, was a failed scholar who, after having religious visions, believed he was the younger brother of Jesus Christ, sent to establish a heavenly kingdom of great peace on earth. His movement combined Christian-inspired ideology with a deep-seated hatred for the Manchu rulers. The rebellion swept across southern China, establishing a capital at Nanjing and threatening the very existence of the dynasty. The Qing court, weakened and inept, was unable to crush the rebellion on its own. It had to rely on newly formed regional Han Chinese armies, which ultimately saved the dynasty, but also decentralized military power away from the throne, a shift that would have major consequences later. The rebellion was eventually put down, but at the cost of an estimated 20 million lives, leaving vast swathes of the country devastated. As the dynasty reeled from one crisis to another, a powerful and enigmatic figure came to dominate the court: Empress Dowager Cixi. Originally a low-ranking concubine, she rose through the ranks by giving birth to the emperor's only son. After her husband's death, she became the regent for her young son, and later her nephew, effectively ruling China from behind a silk screen for nearly half a century. Cixi was a master of court politics, shrewd, conservative, and deeply suspicious of foreign influence. She supported limited modernization, known as the self-strengthening movement, which aimed to adopt Western technology, particularly military technology, to defend Chinese civilization, but without changing the core Confucian political structure. New arsenals, shipyards, and railways were built, but this was reform on the surface only. The deep-seated resistance to fundamental institutional change meant that China was always one step behind. The ultimate test of these reforms came in 1894 with the First Sino-Japanese War. Japan, which had undergone a much more rapid and thorough modernization during its Meiji Restoration, easily defeated China's supposedly modernized forces. The defeat was a profound shock, a humiliation far greater than the losses to the Western powers. Japan was a small, historically subordinate nation, and its victory proved that simply grafting Western technology onto a traditional system was not enough. The loss triggered a scramble for concessions, as foreign powers carved out spheres of influence across China, threatening to dismember the country like a melon. The shock of defeat spurred a new, more radical push for reform. In 1898, the young Guangxu emperor, influenced by progressive scholars, launched the 100 Days Reform. In a dizzying series of edicts, he sought to overhaul the entire imperial system, modernizing the administration, the legal system, and education. But this was too much, too fast for the conservative establishment. Cixi, with the backing of the military, launched a coup, placed the emperor under house arrest, and brutally suppressed the reformers. The window for peaceful top-down reform had slammed shut. Cixi's conservative backlash culminated in her support for the Boxer Rebellion in 1900. The Boxers were a secret society in northern China who believed that their martial arts and spiritual rituals made them invulnerable to foreign bullets. Fueled by anti-foreign and anti-Christian sentiment, they attacked missionaries, Chinese Christians, and anything associated with the West. In a disastrous miscalculation, Cixi declared war on all foreign powers and sided with the Boxers, hoping to drive the foreigners out once and for all. The result was another catastrophe. An international force of 8 nations marched on Beijing, looted the city, and forced the court to flee. The Qing were compelled to sign yet another humiliating treaty, the Boxer Protocol, which imposed a staggering indemnity and allowed foreign troops to be permanently stationed in the capital. The dynasty was now completely at the mercy of foreign powers, its authority and prestige shattered. In the final years of the dynasty, even Cixi recognized that change was unavoidable. She initiated a series of last-ditch reforms, many of which mirrored the ones she had crushed just a few years earlier. The old civil service exam was abolished, a modern education system was planned, and a constitution was even promised. But it was too little, too late. Decades of humiliation and failed reforms had destroyed the dynasty's credibility. Revolutionary ideas, inspired by Western thought, and championed by figures like Sun Yat-sen, spread like wildfire among students, merchants, and soldiers in the new armies. They argued that China's only hope was to overthrow the Manchus and establish a republic. The end came swiftly. On October 10, 1911, a rebellion broke out among soldiers in the city of Wuchang. The revolutionary sentiment that had been simmering for years finally boiled over. The uprising spread rapidly from province to province, each one declaring its independence from Qing rule. The court, now without the powerful Cixi who had died in 1908, was in disarray. They placed their hopes in a powerful military man, Yuan Shikai, to suppress the rebellion. But Yuan was an opportunist. He played both sides, negotiating with the revolutionaries while pressuring the imperial court. He saw his chance not to save the dynasty, but to lead the new China himself. And so we return to that cold February day in 1912. Faced with the unstoppable tide of revolution and abandoned by their top general, the imperial court had no choice. The Empress Dowager Longyu, acting as regent for the child emperor Puyi, signed the imperial edict of the abdication of the Qing emperor. In a final, graceful act, the edict did not speak of defeat, but of transferring sovereignty to the people to create a new republic. 268 years of Qing rule and over 2,000 years of imperial history came to a quiet, anticlimactic end. The Dragon Throne was empty. A new, uncertain, and tumultuous era for China had begun. The fall of the Qing is a powerful reminder that history is driven by both internal decay and external pressures. A proud, sophisticated empire, blinded by its past glory, failed to adapt to a rapidly changing world. Its story is a complex tapestry of magnificent achievement and tragic failure, of visionary leaders and disastrous decisions. It's a history that continues to shape China and its relationship with the world to this very day. Thank you so much for joining us on this journey through the epic rise and fall of China's last dynasty. If you found this story as fascinating as we do, please consider liking this video and subscribing to our channel for more deep dives into history. Let us know in the comments which part of the Qing Dynasty's story you find most compelling. Until next time, stay curious.